Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Supplier Onboarding Supplier Liaison training. My name is Douglas Bailey. I am the manager of the supplier team here at the university. Joining me on this morning will be Becky O'Connell, who's our director of treasury at the university, as well as a few members of the supplier team, Jana Duncan and Jamie Snelling. And also we'll have Kathy Blackburn, the director of AP. She'll share a few updates with you as well. Also listening on the call today, I believe we have Michael Staten. Mike was very instrumental in helping with the design of this product, as well as Jacob Neal and Brad Holt. That whole entire team has been very instrumental in helping us with the design and rollout of this product. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the agenda. So on today, we'll talk about what is supplier onboarding. We'll talk about your role as the supplier liaison. We'll show you how to search for a supplier in Peoplesoft. We'll also show you how to ensure that your email address is set up properly in My System Profile, which is also in Peoplesoft. We'll show you the supplier registration template. We'll do a few demos on how a supplier can actually register in the system, and how they also can request a user ID to do any changes to their profile. And also we'll show you how to actually do how that supplier will actually do some of those change requests. Lastly, the supplier team will talk about the cash custodians, and what that process will look like going forward. And then Kathy Blackburn will wrap it up for us on today, giving you some information on the new student reimbursement process. And then Joanne will take us home with a few resources and some contacts should you all have any questions after the training on this morning. All right, so what is supplier onboarding? Supplier onboarding is a new online supplier registration system that will give our current suppliers, as well as any suppliers that are not currently in the system, give them access to the system through a registration or a change request in the portal. As we said, this new portal will, and we say new, but we've been live with this portal since July 27th. This portal will allow potential suppliers to register to become a supplier, and it'll also allow current suppliers to request a user ID and make any updates to their profile that they need to make, whether that be updating a remit address or updating ACH information. It'll allow them to do all of that. There's going to be specific forms for domestic suppliers or U.S. suppliers versus international or foreign suppliers. There's specific forms for both supplier types, and we'll get into that here once we do the demo. One thing we really love about this system, it'll give everybody email notifications anytime anything is done. When a supplier submits their registration for approval, that supplier will actually get an email telling them that their registration has been submitted for approval. Once it's been submitted for approval and approved, you as the supplier liaison, you will get a notification that that supplier is approved and in the system and ready to use to create a payment request or issue a PO. So that's one thing that's another one of the things that we really like about the system. And again, like I said, we went live with this system as of July 27th. So we've been operating on this system a little over 2 months now. But as of October 1st, we pulled some metrics just to kind of see how we were doing, and what we found was 83% of the suppliers that has come through this supplier portal system were able to register either with 0 issues or minimal issues. The important thing to note there is, we're happy with that. We love the 83%, but we do or have identified some areas where we can push that 83% even higher. So the team is working really hard on getting that number up even more than what it currently is. But we have identified some issues that we can control, and we'll get those resolved and definitely get that number above that 83%. So supplier liaisons. So you all are here, you're supplier liaisons, and we're here to kind of explain to you what your role is in this process. So your role as the supplier liaison will be to determine, number one, if you have a supplier that you want to use, determining if that supplier is already in the system. And we'll show you that here shortly, a screen that you can use in Peoplesoft. That's going to be very key because if that supplier is already in the system, that's going to determine which template you send to them to invite them into the portal. So that's something very important we'll touch on here, and we'll show you how to do that here shortly. You'll also be responsible for sending the email that contains the URL to invite the supplier into the portal. You'll be responsible for approving the supplier registration at the department level. You'll be responsible for being familiar with the registration and change request forms, in which, like I said, we'll do some demos and get you even more familiar with those forms. And for the folks where this is your first time joining us, we'll introduce that to you. And then lastly, you'll be responsible for being the first level of contact for all initial supplier setup and their questions. So what we mean there is, you have a supplier you want to do business with, and you send them one or the other template letters. You send them a template letter to register, or you send them a template letter to request a user ID so that they can make a change. The goal there is for you guys, ladies and gentlemen, to be the first level of contact for any of their questions. And then if they pose any questions to you that you can't answer, then we'll be here as a support for you as the liaison. But the goal is to filter have those questions go to our liaisons, and then we basically be a support system for you as the liaison. Okay. So one of the first things you want to do before you submit that invitation letter to your supplier is you want to ensure that whether or not they're actually in the system. So what can happen is, if, let's say, you don't do this step and you're trying to do business with a supplier and they're already in the system, but you send them a registration template. What's going to happen is, if you send them that registration template letter, and again, that registration template letter is for any suppliers that are not currently in the system. If you send them that registration template letter, what that's going to do is they're going to get that letter, they're going to access the URL, get into the portal to try to register, but it's going to tell them that basically they're already in the system. So that could cause a little bit of confusion for them. So we just want to make that distinction that, if the supplier is in the system, we don't want to send them the registration letter. We want to send them the user ID request letter, so that they can request a username and password to access their supplier profile that is already in the system. So the way that you can do that is in Peoplesoft. If you navigate from the main menu, navigate to suppliers, and then supplier information, add, update, and review suppliers. It'll bring you to this screen where you can search on your supplier either by name, address, or ID type. The first way is going to be the name. What you would want to do is, here in this name field, you'd want to change this to contains, and then put in any unique portion of their name or their company name. And once you do that, we don't have a screenshot here, but once you do that, you get some results down here, and you can determine if that supplier is actually in the system. The second way that you can search is on address, and you can also do a combination of name and address. You can do a unique portion of their name and some unique portion of their address. You can search that way as well. The way that I really kind of prefer is the tax ID, because any individual or mostly any business is going to have a tax identification number that's unique to them. Most times you're not going to see well, you'll never see in a situation where an individual is going to share a tax ID with someone else. But this searching on the tax identification number is really going to be the most efficient way to search on your suppliers. So if you have that tax ID number, you definitely want to just search on that tax ID. And if they're in the system, it'll show up in the results column, results down at the bottom. We did do an upgrade to this particular page. Now, it used to be in the past where some of you on the call may remember this. If you used this page before, in the past, you would search for a supplier in here and you would get some results at the bottom and you would see a status of active or inactive. What that status was actually the address status, not the status of the supplier. We've updated this page to include the status of the supplier, as well as the status of the addresses associated with that supplier. And I believe we also added the zip code and rearranged things a little bit. But that was an enhancement that we did to this page to help you as the liaison understand, is the supplier active or inactive, or is the address inactive or inactive? If that supplier is inactive, if you do a search and your supplier is in here and inactive, what'll need to happen is we'll need to make that supplier active again before your supplier can go in and request a user ID. If their supplier status, and we're not talking about the address, but if their supplier status is in an inactive status, we'll need to get a W-9. You need to reach out and get a W-9 and get it to us so that we can get them reactivated in the system. And then once they're reactivated, at that point, they can go ahead and request a user ID and submit whatever change they need to make. The other thing that you'll want to ensure that you do is ensure you have the correct email address in Peoplesoft. What that's going to do is allow, once your supplier submits their registration to become a supplier, that's going to, having the correct email address in the system, that's going to allow that registration to route to you as the liaison so that you can either approve or deny it. And then obviously once you approve and deny it, it'll route to the supplier team. We'll review it for completeness and approve it or request more information or whatever we need to do. But the way that you'll want to do this is in Peoplesoft, from the main menu screen, you'll want to simply just navigate to My System Profile. And then once you navigate to My System Profile, you want to ensure that you have email user and work list user checked. You also want to ensure that whatever work email address you use on a day-to-day basis, that's the email address that you'll want to ensure you have in here. And then you simply save. Now from this screen, you can also assign your work list. Like if you're going to be out for any amount of time, from this screen you can also assign your work list to your backup. So your registrations can still be approved. You can do that from this screen as well.
Douglas, we have a question.
Sure.
If a supplier is inactive, we send the paper W-9 directly to the controller's office?
If the supplier is inactive, send the paper W-9 directly to the controller's office. Is that the question?
That's the question.
Yeah. So yeah, if the supplier is inactive, yes, you'll want to send that W-9 to us so that we can reactivate that supplier. That's what's going to allow us. That's what's going to allow us to be able to reactivate the supplier, is that W-9. Once we get that W-9, we can go ahead and reactivate the supplier, and then your supplier can go out and request a user ID and submit whatever change request they need to make.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the supplier registration template letter. This is going to be the template letter that you want to send to your suppliers that are not in the system, but you want to invite them to be a supplier. One of the things that we've noticed is some of you are probably sending this letter along with the user ID request letter when you're sending the invitation to your suppliers. You don't want to do that. You want to send one or the other. If it's a supplier that's not in the system and they need to register to become a supplier, you only want to send the supplier registration letter. And what you want to do is you'll want to copy. I believe the latest letter that we sent out was September 10th. That was the latest letter that we sent out. What you'll want to do is copy all of this information from this letter and paste it into the body of your email and then send it to the supplier. But the key thing to note here is you don't want to send this as an attachment to the supplier, and you don't want to send both template letters. You want to send one or the other. And once you decide which one it is you need to send, you want to copy this language from this letter, paste it into the body of your email, and then forward it on or send it on to your supplier.
All right, we have a couple more questions.
Okay.
If we change the email address and system profile to redirect for backup purposes, does it only redirect to supplier management emails? Oh, so I guess Bridget's asking, like, if we do that, will it provide a backup for all of the transactions that she's responsible for approving? Correct, Bridget? I'm waiting for her to respond. It will redirect everything, Tiffany is saying, Tiffany Boyd. Okay, and the next question, sorry, I've got a few popping in here, so I'm trying to make sure I get them all.
Okay.
What is the biggest reason the supplier status has changed to inactive? Is it just getting a new W-9?
So the biggest reason the supplier status is going to be changed to inactive is if there's no activity on that supplier in the last, I believe, 18 months. If that supplier doesn't have any activity on their profile for 18 months, that will move. We will move that supplier into an inactive status.
The next question is there any consideration to making the letters available and a link to reduce the liaisons from having to send an email? And I would answer that to say, I don't think we will, because, Bridget, we need to make sure that you're always using the most updated version. And if we have a link out there and then you also have something, somebody also has something saved on their desktop, chances are you may use the wrong version, because we always want to make sure that there's any changes, we're sending you the most updated version. Also, the link to the supplier portal is in that letter, and we don't want to put that out there on the website either. We only want that to be sent by you as liaison to suppliers. Do you have anything to add, Douglas?
Nope, that's it. That's perfect.
I actually do, if that's all right. This is Jonna from the supplier team. Also, because you have to look first to see if they're already in the system, you would have to know which ones send them, either registration or access to their profile. So that's why you have to look and then send the correct letter. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you, Jonna. And then can this be sent to us as a PowerPoint for us to have? Absolutely, Helen. We can, this is all actually, I'll show you where actually you can find the most of the, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied, the PowerPoint presentation and the webinar recording at the end of this session, and it will always be available out there in the supplier management page. Next question, why would we want to include the document as an attachment, providing we change the information at the bottom to reflect our name, department, contact info?
So I think the question is, why would you want to include it as an attachment?
Yeah, instead of, I guess James is asking why are you suggesting that we copy and paste into an email instead of adding to an attachment, as an attachment?
Right. So yeah, so we're asking, we're basically saying to put it in the body of the email, just to try to streamline it for the supplier a little bit. Is when they open their email, it's the information they need is right there. I mean, for some suppliers, you know, some of them aren't used to supplier onboarding self-service portals. So basically just trying to make it as simple and basic as we can for the supplier without having so many clicks.
Absolutely. Okay, Douglas, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is just a screenshot of what the supplier onboarding self-service portal looks like once your supplier, once you send them that template letter and they click on the link to access the portal. This is what they're going to see. This is a screenshot of what they're going to see. As you can see, we have here a sign-in option. We have a welcome that just kind of gives like a high-level welcome to the portal. We also have the user registration tile, and this is where they'll actually go in to register as a supplier or request a user ID if they're already a supplier. And then we've got some announcements that we'll put out there periodically to communicate with your suppliers. And also we've got this FAQ section, some of our frequently asked questions. So once they click on that user registration tile, it'll bring them to this page where they'll find the supplier registration forms. If they are a domestic supplier or a U.S. supplier, they will want to use the section for domestic supplier to register. If they're a foreign or international supplier, they'll want to use the section for international supplier request. Just a few things to note here. Before they actually click on these buttons to register, before they get started, there's just a few things that we let them know they'll need prior to going into the registration. So if it's a U.S. supplier, we let them know, hey, you'll need a copy of your signed W-9, you'll need your tax ID number, and if you're signing up for ACH, you need your bank routing and account number. So just some tips we're passing along to them prior to them going into the portal. So the approval workflow for supplier liaisons, the way this is going to work is all new supplier registrations, they'll be approved first at the department level, and that's going to be you as the supplier liaison. And then once you approve it, when you approve it, basically what you're telling us as the supplier team is, yes, this is a supplier that I am trying to do business with. They are good for you to go ahead and review for approval. If it's not someone that you're trying to do business with, you'll want to deny that, and then it'll never even get on our radar. There you will see a request more information button on that approval page. That is a button that you will never have to use. That'll always be a button the supplier team will use. Any additional information that we need, we'll request that information on your behalf. We'll just simply need you guys and ladies and gentlemen to either approve or deny that registration. That's for the registration request. Any new user ID requests. So if your supplier is in the system and they just simply need to request a user ID, you as the liaison, you will not be involved in that process. If they're already in the system, they're going to go out and request a user ID, give us some shared secrets. If they give us that information correctly, that'll route to us and we'll approve that. So again, we're making the distinction between a user ID request, a supplier that is already in the system, versus a registration, a supplier that is not in the system. So this is what that approval page is going to look like. Again, we talked about the approve, deny, and request more information buttons. When you get here, what you want to focus in on is the name, maybe the address. If that's a name and address that you recognize and it's one that you want to do business with, you'll want to approve it. If not, you'll want to deny it. Some of you may notice this information over here: duplicate supplier, OFAC checking. That's nothing you'll have to be concerned with. We'll look at that on your behalf as well. If we find any issues there, we'll request more information or whatever we need to do to get it resolved. All right, so we're going to just do a quick demo here. And this demo is going to be from the perspective of the supplier. The supplier is trying to go in and register. Once they register, and once they submit their registration, we'll show you what it's going to look like from the perspective of you as the liaison.
While you're doing that, Douglas, we do have a question. Is there a shortcut for honorariums, for example, one-time payments?
So let me touch on that for a while. So when we say one-time payment, the one thing that comes to mind is, and we think what's happening is, so we understand that there are some departments out there that'll have research participants that's not a part of the USC organization. They may be a participant on a study that's basically a one-time payment. We think that some of the departments are pushing those research participants through the portal. That's not necessarily the intent of the portal. If it's a research participant one-time payment kind of deal, and Becky, feel free to jump in on this as well. Those probably should not be going through the supplier portal. We do have a card program. If we have any of those research participants one-time payment type deals, those really should be going through the card program, not necessarily the supplier portal.
Yeah, let me speak to that a little bit, Douglas. I was going to do it at the end, but I'm not sure if that's what the question is in regard to. It may be a true honorarium as opposed to a research participant that they're asking about. And honestly, I don't know if there's a shortcut for that. You still have to get them in there as a supplier if you're paying them an honorarium. But for the research participants, we actually have 2 prepaid debit card programs here in the controller's office, if you don't know about them already. They are used in part to provide incentives for your research study participants. And the portal, like Douglas said, is not really designed for a research participant to have to go in and set them up themselves up as a supplier, especially if they're going to receive less than $600 per calendar year, in which case, a 1099 is required. But we just wanted to let you know that these prepaid debit card programs are out there. If, as Douglas said, if for some reason you're trying to reach out to your participants and ask them to go through the portal, if you use our prepaid debit card programs, there is no supplier setup involved. We have actually 2 programs. The first one is we affectionately card, which we can provide actual physical Visa debit cards to your participants that you can distribute when they've completed their requirements. Or the one that's really gaining in popularity is the business expense prepaid debit card program. That's where we can put a prepaid debit card in the hands of an employee that's involved in the study, and we can load funds on those cards, and that employee can then go purchase electronic gift cards, which can be pushed out to the participants when they complete the requirements of the study. Like I said, there's no supplier portal set up in that case. There is documentation that you have to provide, which basically substantiates the distribution of those cards, similar to what was done in the past when a cash advance was requested. So like I said, those programs they're fairly new, couple of years, I guess. The Park Card's been out there a couple of years, the business expense maybe about a year, and very, very well received. And we think that would be a better use, definitely, for these participant payments, as opposed to issuing them a check, in which case they'd have to be set up as a supplier in the portal. If you have any questions about that program, we have documentation we have forms and procedures out on our website, on the Controller's Office website. We also have a dedicated card mailbox. It's real easy to remember: cards, CARDS, @mailbox.sc.edu. And Melinda Kraft monitors that mailbox She's the assistant director here in the in Treasury in the Controller's office, and she is our resident expert on that. And we'll get back to you right away if you have any questions about that. So, like I said, I was going to do that at the end, but since it came up, well, may as well go ahead and address it now. So,
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate that.
Okay. Douglas, we have a few questions, but I'm going to let you go through the demo before we ask those so that we don't break up the flow.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so you have sent the invitation letter to your supplier because they're not in the system, so they actually need to register to become a supplier. So they click on that little link that you send them in the email, and it brings them to this welcome page, this landing page. From here, what they'll want to do is click on user registration. And you'll notice we've got a number of different options here. The first two is what we want to focus on right now. This is going to be for suppliers that are not currently in the system. If they are in the system, if you have to send them the user ID request template letter, they'll want to focus on the last three. But for this particular demo, we're talking about a supplier that is not in the system. So for this particular demo, we're going to act as if this is a U.S. supplier. So we're going to register as a U.S. supplier. Again, if you click on more here, we talked about that, where it gives them some tips of some things they'll need prior to starting the registration process. So we want to register now. One really helpful thing to point out here, as we said, you know, some suppliers, we're just gonna have some suppliers that aren't used to a portal. So what we've done here is we've put some helpful tips in here before they even start this process. We put some helpful tips in here, and we're giving them two options. They can look at a job aid, either a written job aid or a video job aid. So if any of them have any questions, you can definitely point this out to them. If they're a U.S. business, they'll want to use this written job aid or video job aid, and if they're a domestic individual, they'll want to use the link for this written job aid or video job aid. Very helpful aids, just something out there to help the suppliers along in the process. So for this particular demo, we're going to act as if we are a business, and we want to hit next. Just a couple things to point out here as well. Here you'll notice some instructional text up top, and anywhere you see this little question mark, it'll just give the supplier a little bit more detailed instructions to help them through the process. So the first thing they'll want to do is enter their tax ID number, and that's a made-up number for demo purposes. Then they'll want to provide us with the email address of the USC contact or the supplier liaison that invited them into the portal. And then they'll just want to go through and answer the profile questions accordingly. They will be required to attach a W-9 if they're a U.S. supplier. Their international supplier, they'll be required to attach Form 8233 or Form W-8. If they want to sign up for ACH, and once it loads here, we can show you where they'll do that. If they want to sign up for ACH, that's what this question is going to do. If they want to sign up for ACH, they'll want to select yes here. And then we'll show you in the payment tab where they will enter their ACH information. So here, this is where we'll want them to enter their address information, whether it's a primary address, a remit address, or an order address. Primary address is typically going to be the corporate address, their tax address in most cases. The remit address is where they want their payment to be sent, and their order address typically is the address. If you're doing a PO, that's going to be their PO address, the purchase order, where they want the purchase order to go. They'll just want to enter their address information. They will be required to enter an email address here. And if they don't enter it here, anything marked with an asterisk is required. So if they try to move on without entering it, the system is going to notify them. So they really can't mess this up. If they need to add a remit address, they'll simply want to click on remit address here to add that remit address. That those fields expand. If they need to add an order address, they'll simply click on the order address. Those fields expand. One other thing I want to point out here, you'll see the exit, save for later, previous, and next here. That's the same thing down below. So same thing, just want to point that out. See, there we go. We got some errors here. So it's saying we need to add a state. I believe that's going to be it.
What's so great, Douglas, is that the errors are listed up there at the top in red, so it actually walks the supplier through what needs to be changed or added.
Right. I need to uncheck order here. Now I should be able to move forward. There we go. All right. Next, your supplier will want to enter their contact information. This needs to be their contact information. This doesn't need to be your contact information. This doesn't need to be a USC employee's contact information. This should be the supplier's contact information. We have seen that where suppliers submit their registration because they put a USC contact down as their contact, and that's something that we'll push it back to the supplier for because we don't want or shouldn't have USC contacts on our supplier's profile as a contact. They'll want to enter their contact information here. Email address. Telephone number. And then select the contact type. If they're an ACH contact, general sales, they'll want to select that here. Once they enter that information, the key thing for them to note here is this user ID. They'll want to make a note of this user ID because we will not email that to them for security purposes. We will, however, email the temporary password, but the user ID, we will not email that to them. They'll want to make a note of that just in case they don't make that note. If they try to move forward, we're going to tell them here, hey, make a note of your user ID. Because we're not gonna send that to you. So if you remember on the profile questions, we had that question about ACH. If they answer yes to that question, this is actually where they will want to enter their ACH information. Another thing to note here, this is just a little helpful tip that'll show them on their check where their routing and account number is so that they can enter that information here correctly. They'll want to select the account type, whether it's a checking or savings account, and then enter the account number. Once they get that information entered, they can hit next. And this is basically an attestation saying that the university can deposit funds into this ACH account. So to agree to that attestation, they'll want to select OK. And then this is the last step. They'll want to ensure that they have their email in here to receive any email communications. That's going to be the email address that we're going to send temporary passwords, notification of acceptance of registration, as well as the approval of it. Before they submit it, they'll want to agree to the terms, select the terms of agreement. And then at this point, they can submit. They can also review their registration, all of the information that they've entered up until this point. They can review that here with this review button. They can save for later. If they save for later, they'll get email notification with instructions on how to get back in the system and finish their registration, so they can do all of that from here. For demo purposes, I'm actually not going to submit this, but I'll show you what this is going to look like from the perspective of the liaison next. So the supplier has entered all of their information. They submit their registration. They're going to get an email saying their registration has been submitted. Once they do that, then you, as the supplier liaison, you'll get an email saying that you need to take action on this registration. And that email is going to look like this. It'll tell you suppliers been submitted for your approval. It'll give you supplier name, some information on them. What you'll want to do here is you can either, I don't know, some of you may work from your work list in Peoplesoft. Some of you may work from your email, but you'll want to click on this email. Go ahead and sign in. And you may remember this screenshot from a few slides back. This is where you'll look at the name and you'll either want to approve or deny it. Okay, so do we want to take some questions, Joanne, before we move on?
Absolutely. I know John has been answering some questions along the way, but I'm going to read them out loud just to make sure everybody can, I don't know who's following the chat. So let's see, I need to find where we were. Here we are. So Tracy is asking, can we query all the suppliers we've approved?
Yes. Well, yes. So from your, let's see if we can. Okay, so from your, if you log into Peoplesoft and from the main menu, if you navigate to suppliers and then supplier registration, and then I believe it's, what's the wrong one? I believe it's review edit request. There we go. So from here is where you can query any suppliers that you've approved. You just want to
And then up there, they would change that, yeah, depending on what they're looking for. Yeah.
It may be, okay, it's view history, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the breadcrumbs is supplier registration, and then view history. And then you'll want to look at the approval status, change that to approved, and then you can search to see any of the suppliers you've approved. So yes, there is a way to query suppliers you have approved.
And they all have access to that page as a liaison, correct?
I believe so, Mike. I'm not sure if Mike's on the call, Mike.
No, I don't think Mike is on the call.
Okay.
But let's make a note of that, because that would be handy to send out to all liaisons just in case they're not here on the call.
Right.
So we'll send a communication.
Yeah, we'll let you guys.
Yep. Okay, the next questions. If you determine you need information from the supplier and the supplier has questions regarding what you have asked for, as the liaison, do we just defer those questions to you, as oftentimes we aren't familiar with the request?
So if we request more information of the supplier reaches out to you. You're asking, should the supplier reach out to you or us? I think that's the question, right?
Yeah, Jonna said, Tiffany, we'd like you to point them to the job aids and videos on the website, but yet they can be directed to us at apsupplier@mailbox.sc.edu.
Yeah, so it's gonna be very important to point them to the job aids. What we found in these first 2 months, any of the questions that we do get from the liaisons or the supplier, most times the answer is in the portal, whether it's in a video job aid, a written job aid, or just the instructional text. So it's going to be important to really push them to that portal, and that's really kind of the purpose of this training, so that we can show you all where the resources are in the portal, so that when they do come with questions, you know exactly where to point them to in the portal, to get an answer to their questions.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Would the one-time supplier payment apply to someone who is hired as a guest speaker for a training or conference?
No, that actually needs to go through the portal, because if that's let's say it's going to be, I mean, off top, we get from time to time guest speakers from overseas, and when we're dealing with guest speakers from overseas, there's tax implications, so that really should be coming through the portal.
So some of the, and that was Jonna's suggestion as well. Thank you, Jonna. Some of the suppliers are entirely unresponsive when it comes to my prompting for change request registrations. Do you have any tips for initial contact so they don't ignore the request?
So I think the question is, I think the scenario is you've sent a user ID request. They're already in the system. You've sent the user ID request so that they can request a user ID and go in and update their supplier profile. I think that's the scenario, right?
Well, they're saying for either. They're just not responding to their emails for a change request or a registration. So I guess they're sending out, our templates, and their suppliers are not responding. And I have another individual saying they're having the same issue.
So, and this is someone that's wanting to do business with the university?
Yep, exactly. They're saying, yes, exactly. Multiple prompts and no responses.
I would think if they want to do business with the university, they'll respond. That would be my answer to that. If they want to do business with the university, they're not gonna sit on it. I would imagine if they're sitting on that, they may be contemplating if they really want to do business. If we're paying them, I would think they would be motivated to go ahead and get that registration submitted.
Yeah, and this is Becky. I would like to ask what we used to do in the past. I mean, we still had to get a W-9 at the very least from these people to be able to pay them. So, what did we do in the past when they were unresponsive when we requested that?
Yeah, a lot of people now are piping in that they're having the same issue. Suppliers are just not responding to their emails. I guess if they want to be a supplier and they want to get paid, then they have to go through that process, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, Joanne. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we had this issue in the past, prior to the portal. It's the same information. They're just providing that information to us directly. There's nothing different about the information that we're requesting. As we've requested W-9, we've requested them to fill out that supplier profile for page that asks for their address, their contact information, ACH information. It's all the same information. The only difference is they're providing it to us through the portal, as opposed to providing it to us via the paper process. And what we found is and I don't know, maybe this could be a tip to pass on to the suppliers. What we found is in the past, it kind of our business rule was, we get those suppliers entered and approved within 3 business days. We didn't always make that cutoff prior to going live with the portal. But what we found is, we've been hitting that mark every single time since we've gone live with the portal. So we can get these things approved a lot faster. Maybe that could be a tip to point out to them. It'll get approved a lot faster if you go through the portal.
So they're talking about a Dropbox, but that's not with the controller's office. That must be within their college department. Am I correct?
Yeah, we're not using Dropbox. Isn't used in this process at all. It's just the portal. It's just them going into the portal, registering, attaching a W-9, entering address information, contact information. This system doesn't use Dropbox at all. But if you have a specific situation that you want to send in to AP Suppler, we can take a look at that.
They're saying that Dropbox is actually the supplier we're trying to pay.
If you want to send us,
Yeah, let's do that offline. Yeah. All right. I'll make note of all of this, Douglas, so that we can reach out to those individuals. I'm trying to find where we are now because people are popping in with their comments. Okay. Next question is, we talked about that one. Some of my suppliers are entirely unresponsive. We talked about that one. During the supplier registration process, I had a specific question from a potential supplier. What is the updated link to the form I-321, because the current one doesn't seem to be working? And James, while Douglas was talking, I actually went out to our website to make sure that the links were working, and they are. So I'm not sure what the problem is, but we'll definitely bring you out there. Maybe Douglas can actually bring you out to that page at the end of this session, and we can show you where the supplier can find working links. Is their user ID something we can see once they register? So if they forget to write it down, we can provide it.
Yes. So if they forget to write that user ID down, they'll need to reach out to the supplier team to retrieve that information. We can provide that for them.
Okay. Can a supplier update their information anytime after they've registered? Can they make an address change, etc., by logging into their account themselves?
Yes, they absolutely can.
Yeah. Could the user ID reminder send them back to copy it down? The screen was covering the user ID.
So what they'll want to do is, once they get that notification, they'll want to hit cancel to go back and get that user ID. And then once they copy it down or write it, then they can hit next again, and they'll get that notification again. But then this time they'll just want to hit OK to move forward.
Okay, sorry. Going down through, we got a lot of comments. Can a supplier liaison pull a query on supplier progress? I think you've already covered that, and we're going to send out more information regarding that view history option.
Right.
It's a lot to ask of a guest speaker to register as a supplier in order to receive an honorarium. We had a distinguished speaker recently, and I doubt very seriously he will ever go through these steps. So we can give him the honorarium. In the past, they just need to submit the W-9 or W-8 BEN form, which was much easier to request from them. Can we make an exception for this situation, submit the W-9 or W-8 BEN, then enter into PS payment request with the honorarium form?
So we want to push as much as possible. We want to push as much as possible our suppliers through the portal. That was the intent of the portal, to push our suppliers through that portal. But if we have any situations that you feel we need to take a look at, you can send those to us, and we can look at those on a case basis. But the intent is to push our suppliers through the portal.
Okay. Let's see. What do we do if a supplier has not received a payment and the status still reflects pending after almost 2 weeks?
The payment status select.
Yes.
Says pending.
Yep. Received a payment.
Okay, so if we're talking about payments, then Kathy, you want to chime in on that one?
Joanne, do you mind repeating the question?
No, I do not. Let's see. What do we do if a supplier has not received a payment and the status still reflects pending after almost 2 weeks?
So does the status of the supplier file reflect pending? Because if that's true, if the supplier has not been approved, then you're correct. Accounts payable will not be able to process it for payment.
Yeah, so
Okay,
I think we probably just need some clarity on if.
Yes,
if
she's saying, Morgan is saying that the supplier was approved.
If the supplier was approved and you have a payment request that's still out there pending, please reach out to accounts payable and they will let you know whatever the issue is. Usually if it goes through payment request and they need additional information, they send you a payment request message that tells you what that is. You can always reach out to ap@mailbox.sc.edu. Good question, though. Thank you.
And she's saying thank you. Douglas, I'm still going down through the questions. I apologize.
You're fine.
Okay. James, I answered your question about the 321, the form. Will all these presentations instructions be placed into an online guide, including all the live links? Everything is out there, Michelle, and we'll take you to the supplier management page and show you where you can find all of this information. Last question, I believe. What is the general turnaround time for suppliers to be approved in Peoplesoft once registration has been completed?
Yep. So once registration has been completed, as long as we don't have significant issues where a supplier didn't sign their W-9 or provided a USC contact instead of their contact, our rule is 3 business days. But what we found is since we've gone live with the portal, what we found is typically we've been able to get these things turned around within about 1 business day.
Awesome. Okay, I think I've got all the questions. There's been a lot of comments, but I think I have all the questions. If I've skipped you, I didn't do it on purpose. And if you want to re-ask the question, copy and paste again, that'd be great. But I'm gonna have Douglas move on right now.
All right, great question, guys. We appreciate it. So now we're going to move into the user ID request template letter. We discussed the registration template letter. That's for a supplier that is not in the system. Now we're talking about a supplier that is in the system. So what you want to do, again, you want to copy. We don't want to send both template letters. We don't want to send both letters. We only want to send one. So we'll want to copy this information, paste it into the body of your email, and send it to your supplier. And this is so that they can request a user ID to go in and make any changes to their profile. Once they're in the portal, they want to click on that user registration tile. And then you'll see the 3 options where they can request a user ID either as a domestic individual or an international individual or a business. So we're going to do a quick demo here. All right, so now you've sent your letter to your request a user ID. Once they click on that link to the portal, it'll land them on this landing page. They'll want to click on user registration. And then they'll want to select one of the 3 options for a user ID request. If they're a US supplier, they'll want to click on the user register now for the domestic request. They're international, they'll want to click on international. We've got 2 for international. This first one is going to be if they have a foreign tax ID. The second one is going to be for if they have a US tax ID. And what we mean by that is you'll see here shortly. User ID, they'll have to provide their tax ID and their supplier ID. So that's why we have two separate options for international, because some of our international suppliers could have a U.S. tax ID as well as a foreign tax ID. But obviously our U.S. or domestic suppliers, they're only going to have a U.S. tax ID. So for this demo, we're going to act as if this is a domestic supplier that is in the system and they need access to their profile. So they'll need to enter their supplier ID. And if they don't know their supplier ID, they can get that from US the Liaison. We showed you earlier in the presentation how to look up a supplier. On that page, you can also get their supplier ID, and that's where you can find it to provide it to them. And then the tax ID, they will know that. They'll just need to enter their tax ID. And then they'll just want to put in their name and email address. Select the terms of agreement. Once they do that, submit it. Once it's submitted, as we said earlier, US the Liaison, you will not be involved in that process. That'll route to the supplier team. We'll approve it, and then the system will send them email notification with their temporary password. Just like in the registration here in the user ID request template, they'll want to make a note of that user ID. This is going to be their user ID. They'll want to make a note of that. Right? So now we're going to talk a little bit about the supplier change request. Once your supplier has once they've requested their user ID, they'll make a note of that user ID. They'll get a temporary password, email them. Once they get that, then they can go in and log into the system and make any changes. From that landing page, they'll want to click on that sign-in tile. And that's where they can enter their user ID and password. Once they're in the template, they'll want to select the appropriate change request template. If they're a domestic or international, they'll want to select that and go ahead and continue on with their change request. So let's just show you what that looks like in a demo. So once they click on that, once they're in the portal, as we said, they can go ahead and sign in with their user ID. And then their password. Like we said, the very first time they log in, it's going to be a temporary password. And then they'll be prompted to change that password to whatever they want to change it to. So now that they've logged in, they can go ahead and complete their change request by clicking on Manage Profile. Select the template, whether they're domestic or international supplier. For this demo, we're going to do a change request to add a remit address. So they'll want to hit the next button. And then they'll want to answer the profile questions. Once they answer those profile questions, they'll want to hit next. And this is just a prompt asking them, are they sure they don't want to sign up for ACH? If they do, they hit yes. If they don't want to sign up for ACH, they'll select no. And then here's where they can add a new address. And this is going to be a remit address that they're adding. Once they get that remit address added, if they don't need to or want to add anything else, then they can move on to the submit tab and they're ready to submit that change. Again, with this change request, once they submit this change request for approval, this will not route to you as the supplier liaison. This will route to the supplier team. We'll review it for completeness and either request more information or approve it. So they'll want to check this box that they've reviewed their changes and then simply submit it. Again, any communication, anytime anything is done, any action is taken on that registration, that communication is going to be sent to the supplier in email. Okay. So cash custodians. So nothing's going to change with the cash custodians. Before we went live and even after now, after going live, the same way you submitted requests to have a cash custodian set up, you're still going to do that the same way. We've got the link to the form out on the controls office website. You'll complete that just as you always have. Send that completed form to AP Suppler, and we'll get those cash custodian forms entered and approved for you. That actually will not be going through the portal. Do we have any more questions, Joanne?
Yes, and I apologize. I didn't realize I wasn't muted and I was typing away. So thank you to Ms. Shannon for reminding me to mute. So Beth is asking, remit address is where the check will be mailed, not the primary address, correct?
Right. That remit address is where they want their payment sent. If they're getting a check, that remit address is where they want that payment sent.
Mm-hmm. And we have more questions about job aids and instructions. And Douglas, I think it would be great if at the end of this presentation, we take them out to the supplier management page so we can show them exactly where everything is.
Okay.
All right. That's it for now. Let's do it when we go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, because you have some resources.
Yeah. Sounds good, Douglas. Thank you.
Right.
That's it for now.
I am now going to turn it over to Kathy Blackburn. She's going to talk to you about the new student reimbursement process. And then once Kathy's done, we'll come back and we'll take you out to the controls office website, show you what some additional resources are to help you guys out as supplier liaisons.
Thank you, Douglas. Good morning, everybody. My name's Kathy. I want to talk to you a little bit about the new student reimbursement process with the implementation of the new supplier portal. We've made a few adjustments. So if you have a student that's a non-employee and you need to reimburse them for any non-travel expenses, you'll no longer need to set them up as a supplier in Peoplesoft. Instead, you will complete a new student reimbursement form. Once you've completed that and attached your receipts, you will send that to the AP Upload mailbox. So the good thing there is you don't have to set them up as a supplier. If, however, you have some type of a reportable expense like a stipend or a fellowship, they will need to have a supplier number. That will have to go through the supplier portal, and then you would submit that request just like you always have through payment request. If you have any students that are employed by the university and you're trying to reimburse them for non-travel expenses, you will continue to use that travel and expense module. And just remember, before you can use the travel and expense module for anyone, for any employee, they do have to put in their banking information in order for them to be valid in that portal, and you be able to see them to create that expense report. All right. The next slide, Douglas. So that student reimbursement reimbursement form is available on the Controller's Office website. It has a section of its own under the accounts payable page. And just to let you know, what I'm seeing on my screen is the actual form. The form will need the student's name completed, their USC ID number, their address, the description of the reimbursement, and then all of those receipts attached. And we would like 1 line per receipt. And then it would need to be approved, and then those receipts and that form would need to be submitted to the AP Upload mailbox. Just so that you know, we are in the process of creating an e-form for this so that we'll try to get it electronic. We don't see that happening until maybe close to the end of the calendar year, maybe beginning of next year's calendar year. So, so be on the lookout for that. Remember, once again, that whatever you used to use for the supplier packages, you will now use the portal for that, unless you have a stipend or a fellowship. And then you will have that student set up a supplier number. Do we have any questions?
Nothing right now, Kathy.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, Douglas. Let's take them out to the supplier management page, show them all the resources that we have.
All right. All right, so out on the Controller's Office website, if you look under the Supplier and Tax Management section of the website, we've got 3 different sections. We've got a section for supplier management, tax management, and also webinars and trainings. So once we're done with this training, these slides as well as a recorded video of this training will be available here under the webinar and training section of our website. Currently, I believe that's the presentation and recording from the last training we did back in July, but this will actually be updated with today's training. Now, on the supplier management section of the website, we've got some resources here for domestic suppliers. We've got job aids for domestic suppliers. We've got job aids for requesting a user ID. And again, we have these job aids as well in the portal, which we showed you earlier, but just another place they can find resources to help them that they can look at to register as a domestic supplier, as well as an international supplier. And we're giving them 2 options. We're giving them a job aid as well as a video job aid. So they'll have some options there. Here is where we kind of explain the difference between an international and a domestic supplier, as well as the cash custodian. I think someone was asking earlier about the I-312. This is actually where they can find that I-312 in the portal. We have a web address in the portal. It's not a link. We weren't able to link it in the portal, but there is a web address in the portal that they can copy and paste into their bar here. That'll take them directly to the I-312. But this is a link to the I-312 that's on the Controller's Office website. So I'm not sure. I think someone said.
I think James, what's happening is that your supplier is trying to use the link in the portal and it's not working. So I think that may be the issue.
Because that's not actually a link in the portal.
Yeah.
This doesn't allow us to actually link it in the portal. What we simply have in the portal is just the text. So if they're copying that text correct, they could paste it into the bar here, and it'll take them directly to the I-312. But if they have issues with that, it is on the Controller's Office website. We have a link to it here.
Okay, James is saying, oh, okay. Yeah, that was the issue, I think.
So this wasn't a question that came up, but this is an issue that I remember seeing before. Someone had said they had an issue with getting a W-9. We also have a link to that W-9 here on the Controller's Office website as well. That's going to be for our domestic suppliers. And then for our international suppliers, we've got links to the W-8 bin, as well as the 8233. Those are out here as well. And for organizations, we've got a link to the W-8 bin E. So we've got those resources out here. And then for anybody that's submitting a request to have a cash custodian set up, this is going to be a link to that cash custodian supplier form. Supplier liaison FAQs, we've got a section out there for this as well. I know we went over it in the presentation, but if you want just kind of a quick FAQ, is my supplier in Peoplesoft? This is the question that needs to be answered before you send your template letter. This is where you can find those instructions. Here we go. This is where you can find the instructions that'll help you determine if your supplier is in Peoplesoft. Some other FAQs. I'm a supplier liaison. How do I add my email address to Peoplesoft? We've got those instructions out here. And then I am a supplier. Do I approve a supplier registration? We've got those instructions out here as well. So this is going to be, you know, the supplier onboarding section. That's probably going to be very helpful for your suppliers. But again, this links to these videos and job aids are also in the supplier portal. And again, that was on, if you remember, when we clicked on that welcome page for the registration, we had those links where we pointed out where they could access the written job aid or the video job aids. But it's going to be the same information, just in different places. Any other questions, Joanne? We
do, but before we move on, just like to thank Jonna. She worked with me to complete these quick demo videos, and they're great. They just get, you know, walk through those steps quickly, and so if anyone would like to watch instead of read, they're a great resource. And thank you, Jonna, for doing that. Yeah, we have some questions. Our first question is, can the supplier have more than one remit address?
Yes, a supplier can have more than one remit address. They won't be able to do that from the registration, but when they go in to do a change request, they will be able to add multiple remit addresses as well as multiple order addresses. So yes.
Okay. And what if a supplier refuses to apply for a user ID but needs a change made to their information in order to be paid? What do we do in that situation?
So the only way they're going to be able to submit a change request is to request a user ID. And again, the only thing they'll have to provide is just their supplier ID and their tax ID. Once they provide that, they'll get their user ID and password like right there on the spot. Those are actually approved faster than change request or registration. So if they're trying to submit a change request, they'll need to get that user ID. They can get that user ID and password right on the spot.
Thank you. And for expenses related to virtual conferences, i.e. registration, is that still being paid through AP? Will it return to the travel office when travel restrictions are lifted? I believe this one's for you, Kathy.
It is. Yes, they're currently being paid through AP because no travel is involved. And yes, when the travel restrictions are lifted and you actually go to a conference, then that registration would go through travel.
Okay. And I think this next one may be for you as well. If we could have something like the new student reimbursement form for a one-time honorarium payments, that would be wonderful. Much more simple and helpful for everyone involved.
Thank you for the question. However, an honorarium would need a supplier number. So it would have to go through the supplier portal in order to get that supplier number.
Okay.
And this is Becky. The reason for that, of course, is it's a reportable payment. We have to send them a 1099 at the end of the year if it's over $600, whereas a student reimbursement, that's just for supplies, so we don't have to report on that. So, you know, that's the distinction there.
Thank you, Becky. The next question is, are we now or ever allowed to pay registrations for virtual conferences with a purchasing card?
So I would refer that to
Kim Rose.
Procurement, to Kim Rose. My understanding is that P cards only pay for supplies, but I would refer that to Kim.
Yeah, so Erica, you can reach out to Kim Rose to ask that question. I'm sure she'll provide some information for you. So the next question is, can you please clarify how stipends and fellowships work through payment request? I always thought those ran through payroll or financial aid.
So if you have a student that's not employed by the university and they're getting a stipend on a grant, and it's for living expenses, those can go through payment request. But if they are employed by the university, you're right, it would go through payroll or financial aid. We always ask that people check through those sources first before they ever come to AP. And they would always require a supplier number that is a reportable, so they would get a 1099 for that.
Thank you. If someone does not want to complete the online process but has performed work for us, I have been asked if I could complete it for them.
So I think the question is if a supplier has already completed the work.
Yeah, but hasn't registered as a supplier.
So before any work is performed or a product is purchased, a supplier should be already in the system. I'm not sure why the work was already done if they weren't in the system yet.
But you know, even if there's no work performed, the supplier liaison should not be completing that process for them, though, in the system.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the supplier liaisons completing these registrations for the suppliers. The suppliers should actually be completing these.
Does the supplier have to request the user ID, or can the department request it?
The supplier would have to request that. And again, requesting that supplier ID is the fastest process of change of all three processes. Once they provide their supplier ID and their tax ID, right after they hit that submit button, they're going to get an email with their temporary password. They'll just need to make a note of that user ID once they're in the portal, but that happens almost right after they hit that submit button.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So Mark I guess he's had some experience. I can't remember who asked that question, but he said that I can tell you from experience, registrations are not allowed via P-card, and so I expect that he's tried to go down that route and it didn't work for him. So just a heads up there. Also, Shannon is saying you may be able to get a department travel card to pay for conference registrations. Kathy, that's probably something that you can comment on.
So currently, because of the travel restrictions, the travel cards are all suspended. It looks like they'll be suspended through this semester. We will revisit that after probably the new year, starting in January, but right now all travel cards are suspended.
Okay, so now Erica, you're getting some responses back here from different people. So my suggestion is to reach out to Kim Rose to clarify, to make sure that what you're doing is appropriate, because some have been able to pay for non-travel registrations using the P card, so as well as webinars. So just reach out to Kim and she'll help you. All right, do we have any more questions? That's the end of the questions right now. Some questions can be paid by the P card as long as there is no travel or food involved. A memo of approval must be accompanied by the P card allocation statement. Thank you, Pam. All right, so if you have any questions after this presentation, or if you have any questions while you're working with a supplier to complete the registration, to request an ID, or to make a change request, then you can always reach out to the supplier team using AP Suppler at mailbox.sc.edu. They're very responsive, very quick to get back to you, so always reach out. And it may be, you know, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Douglas, but it's always nice for the supplier liaison to reach out to the supplier team and the supplier liaison get back with their supplier, just to make sure that, you know, that chain of, you know, information is not broken, and then you can provide that help. Also also really good for the supplier liaison to get those answers, because chances are you'll get those questions down the road, and you'll be able to provide that support.
Yes, that's correct, man. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, Douglas, Becky, anybody have anything to say before we sign off for the day? I think that's
I do. This is Becky. First of all, a huge thank you to the entire team that has been involved in implementation of this module. It's been a tremendous effort. It's been a tremendous team. We I should say, not just they, all of us have put countless hours into developing, testing, training, building resources, and we continue to do so. We are constantly getting feedback, and we are meeting weekly to address problems and concerns that people have, and seeing if what we can fix, what we can make more clear. So thank you to everybody. I feel just a little bit deflated. I don't know if that's the right word, because I'm seeing a lot of comments that suppliers just aren't learning to use the portal. And I really don't know what to say about that, other than it is the way of the future. Believe me, we in the controller's office, really Douglas, he sets USC up as a supplier all the time through these portals. And ours is very simple compared to some of the ones that he has to tackle. So it is the way of the future. But I will reiterate what Douglas said, in that our intent is to send everybody through the portal, but we will entertain exceptions. If you really run into a roadblock, we want to keep those at a very minimum, but we will entertain those on a case-by-case basis. But our intent is to send everybody through the portal. We have gotten some good comments, y'all, through saying that the portal is easy and they love it. But we've also gotten some some indications where we can make some improvements, and we're going to do that and continue to do that. One thing we didn't mention, probably should have mentioned it earlier, and we're going to address this in the portal. The suppliers should not use Chrome as their browser when trying to register. I just found this out recently. It just doesn't work. So they need to use Edge. Like I said, we spent a lot of time developing aids and resources, trying to make it as user-friendly as possible, and we're very proud of it. So hopefully we can continue to direct people that way as we continue to improve the product. So thank you to everybody. Doug, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. Just great questions, guys. And as Becky stated, we talked earlier in the presentation about that 83%. We have identified areas where we can make improvement and push that 83% number up. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to take into account your suggestions and some of the issues that you're running into. As with any new software, there's typically bugs in the beginning, but I can assure you we're working every day to make this a better process for you as well as our suppliers. So thank y'all.
Absolutely. And liaisons, anytime there's a change or something that we need to make you aware of, because I believe Becky's comment about Chrome, I believe we did put that in a communication, Douglas. But we will make sure to send ongoing communications of any new updates that you need to be aware of. And please look for the communication regarding view history to, showing you how you can use that to your benefit. All right, guys, I think that's the end. We have a lot of thank yous. And Douglas, you did a great job. This presentation and webinar out on our website, and we want to wish you guys a very great rest of your day.